A war of words between a British rescue diver and Tesla and SpaceX CEO Elon Musk is playing out in a downtown LA courtroom.
It started with a Twitter spat and then escalated into a defamation lawsuit.
That case was strange for a lot of reasons. It was filed by Lin Wood in Atlanta. I don't know if people know Lin Wood. He's an extremely successful lawyer.
He was once referred to as the attorney for the damned. Since the mid-90s, Atlanta attorney Lin Wood has fought for the reputation of people at the center of some of the biggest cases. One of them right here in Atlanta, the security guard who was a prime suspect in the Olympic Park bombing in 1996.
Represented Richard Jewell in the Olympic bombing case against the Atlanta Constitution. He represented the parents of John Benet Ramsey in their dispute over whether they had been in fact involved in the death of their child. Just a laundry list of big name plaintiff defamation cases. We got into that case. Judge Steve Wilson, many people know of him, had just denied Musk's motion to dismiss the case. Didn't bring the motion as an anti-SLAPP motion because they were concerned with their exposure to attorney's fees, which my reaction was, well, if you didn't have that much confidence in the motion, why would you bring this anyway? You're just a line. I thought it was not a great strategic idea, but it wasn't ours to make at the time. But sometimes if you make a motion to dismiss, all you do is get the judge to think about the case in a way that's very favorable to your opponent, that becomes very difficult to undo later on in the case. And that turned out to be what happened here in a number of ways. Anyway, we had Judge Wilson runs a rocket docket. He gave us 5 months, actually gave us 3 months to get ready for trial, but because of some issues with the lawyers, he gave us an extra month and a half. So we go to trial on December 2nd. And going into that trial, we thought we were in a boatload of trouble. Elon Musk, people may know, was not directly involved in rescuing these kids from the cave in Thailand in the summer of 2018. Vernon Unsworth was on scene, lived through it, helped advise with the rescue. He didn't participate in the rescue because he's not a cave diver, but he had intimate knowledge of that cave that was instrumental. Elon Musk decided that he and his people should respond to pleas for help, and so he got 50 of his engineers at SpaceX to see what they could come up with, and the Boring Company. They thought of drilling, they thought of all kinds of ideas. They didn't have a lot of time, and so they said, why don't we take some of our SpaceX parts and try and make a rescue pod or a rescue sub that can extract some of these kids, because these are extremely dangerous conditions. It's not an easy just pull them out of the cave. It's a mile through torturous, turbulent water that's like coffee because it's mud-filled.
Billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk has a method to save the Thai youth soccer team trapped in a cave. It involves a kid-sized submarine. This is a tube made from SpaceX rocket parts, and Musk has been sharing video of this pod being tested in a pool at a high school in Los Angeles. Musk, the head of SpaceX, Tesla, and the tunnel-digging Boring Company, shared details of the plan on Twitter, and he said the tube is light enough to be carried by 2 divers and small enough to get in through narrow gaps in the cave. This tube has oxygen ports and a cone on the nose to protect it from getting hit with rocks. Musk tweeted that the pod is built from the liquid oxygen transfer tube of a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. And in this journey, a passenger is laying inside the tube with his arms crossed. The diameter is very tight, just 12.2 inches. Once out of the water, the team has to unlock the door carefully, adjusting the pressure and screwing off multiple bolts. Eventually, the hatch is opened and the man can slide out of the top end.
So they build this rescue pod, they fly it over there, and by the time they get there, fortunately, they were able to have extracted the kids with a complicated dive process and sedation of the kids so they wouldn't panic. And so Musk goes on to Shanghai to work on his Tesla factory there. A couple days later, Vernon Unsworth, who was involved in the rescue, the two had never met, goes on CNN and is asked a question. What did you think of Mr. Musk's rescue sub? And he grimaces and says he can stick it where it hurts. It would have had no chance of success, wouldn't have made it the first 50 feet past the dive point, totally just a PR stunt, etc.
We were just talking about this before. What your thoughts on Elon Musk's idea was?
And stick his submarine where it hurts. Just had absolutely no chance of working. He had no conception of what the cave passage was like. The submarine, I believe, was about 5'6" long, rigid, so it wouldn't have gone round corners or round any obstacles. It wouldn't have made the first 50 meters into the cave from the dive start point. Just a PR stunt.
Musk is stunned. He thinks like, wow, we tried to help, and who is this guy? I never met him. So he sends a series of tweets, and he says, I don't know who this guy is, never met him. He lives in a part of Thailand, sus. The thing would have worked. We'll make a video, blah, blah, blah. Sorry, pedo guy, you really did ask for it. Pedo guy.
Soon after those comments, Musk took to Twitter. Now, he didn't name any names, but he said that he never saw this British guy, this British expat guy who lives in Thailand. He challenged that person to release the video from the final cave rescue. And then he wrote this, the more controversial of the comments. On Twitter, Musk says he doesn't need to see that video. He says he'll bring the sub to where the boys are found. He can test it himself. And then he wrote, sorry, pedo guy, you really did ask for it. That's a common reference to pedophilia. Now, he offered no proof or justification for that allegation. And when it was criticized, he actually doubled down. He wrote another tweet saying, I'll bet you a signed dollar it's true. Now, all of those tweets have since been deleted. And now that British cave diver is considering legal action.
That's early July. Mr. Unsworth goes on TV, says this is outrageous, I'm going to take legal action.
It's not finished.
How disrespectful was he, do you think?
I believe he's called me a paedophile. Well, by definition, rescuing 12 young boys, that by definition, that puts everybody else in the same context.
After everything you've done, how does it make you feel when he goes and puts that out there to the world?
I'm not going to make any further comment about him, but I think people realise what sort of guy he is.
Would you consider taking legal action against him?
Yes. It's not finished.
And then at the end of July, Musk tweets to somebody, don't you think it's interesting that he hasn't sued me? And then a few days later, Lin Wood sends Musk's team and Musk a letter explaining that they are about to get sued. Nothing happens for a while. Musk gets entangled with a reporter for BuzzFeed and ends up sending the reporter an email that he writes off the record on. But in the course of the email, he says, why don't you basically get off your ass, uses more pointed language than that, you a-hole, go there and investigate what's going on, stop defending child rapists. That then gets printed in a BuzzFeed article, and Unsworth says, I'm suing, and he sues. And so we're thinking, okay, our client said some really bad things about this guy. He seems like a pretty nice guy. He's got a very experienced lawyer. Lin Wood shows up to depose Elon Musk and is asking, the way he's asking the questions, the way he's getting to the point, you can tell this is somebody who knows what they're doing in defamation. This is somebody who's been through a lot of trials and knows how to get things for trial. And we moved for summary judgment, didn't win, had very uphill climb. We also lost the issue of whether the plaintiff was a limited purpose public figure or a private figure. And it came down to the third prong of that test on germaneness. And I had what was a clever but not persuasive argument as to why calling Unsworth a pedo guy was germane to the public controversy over who should be believed about what was in the best interest of these children. Judge didn't buy it. That's his right. So we go to trial. And I think the way that case came out, the way it came out was because of how that case was tried. And one thing made a big difference before the trial was the jury never heard any damage experts. So in closing argument, when Unsworth's lawyer was asking for a tremendous amount of money, he was really just making it up, pulling it out of thin air.
What was their number?
He wanted $5 million in actual damages. I remember thinking, like, that's a lot of money. It's okay. Then he wanted $35 million in presumed damages, which is for libel per se. He was entitled to request. And then he said, look, this is Elon Musk. He stipulated that he is worth over $20 billion. You've got to do something significant if you're going to punish him. Punish him with $150 million in punitives. And you can see the jurors thinking, like, wow, those are big numbers. Where are you getting it from?
Diver Vernon Unsworth said good morning, and that's all. In the courtroom today during closing arguments, his attorney, Lin Wood, had plenty to tell the jury of 5 men and 3 women. He said the tweet that was sent by Musk, in which he called Unsworth, quote, a pedo guy and a child rapist, was like a nuclear bomb. And he said this is what it's worth in damages. Actual damages, $5 million. Assumed damages, $35 million. Punitive damages, to discourage Musk from ever doing something like this again, $150 million. That's what he wants the jury to award his client.
Well, they actually did have somebody who was going to testify to a lot of that money in the form of reputation repair around the world. And he had a lot of interesting charts and analyses, and he is a PR consultant. I took his deposition, and I got what I thought were some very good concessions. He was also going to testify that it was reasonably foreseeable to Musk, when he wrote that off-the-record email to BuzzFeed, that it would be republished. And so we moved in limine to exclude this expert, and because I thought I got a lot of concessions out of him, and some things he said were actually pretty good for us. Instead of opposing the motion, the day before their opposition was due, they said, oh, by the way, we're withdrawing him. And then they made another maneuver right before trial that was kind of interesting. They said, we're not going to be relying on this BuzzFeed article. We're going to base our claim solely on the original tweet accusing the plaintiff of being a pedo guy.
Why?
But I'll tell you, but
child rapist was
we're
pretty strong.
We're keeping that in to show malice. And and so we had a big fight right before the trial started as to whether they could do that, and whether it was these later statements were relevant to show malice at the time, months earlier. And the judge said, no, it's coming in. I don't know if they made a great use of it to the jury. I don't think the jury understood what they were doing with it. But there were a lot of moving pieces right before the case started. Then it was just a peculiar experience at trial, and it was not what we expected. Elon Musk, they called adverse as their first witness. Now that's a little bit unusual. Typically, you'd call the plaintiff, and you'd want to immediately get the plaintiff's story out, get some rapport with the jury, some emotional notes, whatever. That's not what they wanted to do. They wanted to go after Musk. So for a day or so, there was Musk, then we did redirect, and then they did their recross. Musk, to his credit, did a great job. He came across as a human being, contrite. He apologized to the plaintiff. He said, look, I'm sorry for what I said. My mom would not be proud of me for having said this, and I wish I hadn't said it. It was a playground spat. And that was the other thing. Our theme was that this is just 2 guys going at it in the media. The plaintiff picked the fight, called Musk, said, stick it where it hurts, and said, basically, the whole thing you did here to try and save these kids wouldn't have worked. It actually put their lives at risk. It was done for your own personal PR advantage. And that was a pretty horrible thing to say. And Musk just retaliated. It was inappropriate. It escalated. But he immediately apologized. He took the tweets down within an hour.
Mr. Musk told the court it was wrong and insulting, so I insulted him back. It was an unprovoked attack on what was a good-natured attempt to help the kids. He cast his own word choice as a frivolous and generic insult from his childhood in South Africa, not a literal one.
And so, try and contain the fire a little bit as just that kind
When
of a
did
fight.
the apology happen? At the trial, or was it an apology before
he apologized. Well, 3 times. He apologized. They said it was not an effective or sufficient apology. The first tweets were July 14th or 15th, somewhere in there. He took them down within a few hours, and then he apologized about 48 hours later, 36 hours later. He apologized at his deposition, and then he apologized in front of the jury at trial. The plaintiff was strident, and character is fate, as Shakespeare says, and I think maybe this is an example of it, because I think the way we crossed him, and Bill Price did a phenomenal job of this, he came across as a guy who he would not apologize to Musk, didn't think he owed Musk an apology, thought his life was ruined, this was, a terrible, terrible thing had happened to him. After I deposed him, he produced about this thick of a set of pages of texts running with a friend of his in Thailand over almost a year period that I would have loved to have had when I deposed him, where he just looked like a horrible human being. And he was out for publicity, was going to cut the divers off, make them pay for cutting him out of the loop.
Oh my God.
He said derogatory racial things about
Unsworth?
About the Thai cave dive team, this Navy SEALs, one of whom died in the rescue. Said terrible things.
Did any of that get into the trial?
Oh, you bet.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah, and so we showed this stuff in the cross, and so I think by the end of that cross, it was like, huh. The other thing is, there was another witness, Musk's the head of his home office or family office, Jared Burchell, who was not a lawyer, he's a financial person, had done something that we thought the jury was going to hate, and that is that after Musk was threatened with this lawsuit, they went and accepted an offer by somebody to do PI work. This person said, I can get you the goods that this guy really is a pedophile or engaged in bad things. It turns out this guy was nothing but that. He was a convicted felon for financial fraud, and now is back in jail. But it was in reliance on his dossier on the plaintiff that caused Musk to accuse him of being a child rapist. And that's why I think maybe they pulled that. And anyway, they hired this guy to dig up this dirt. He infiltrated Musk's UK legal team, and there could have been just the most horrific evidence, and we lost our motion in limine on it, that this investigation, all this conduct, and I don't think the plaintiff really made a good use of that at trial. And I think it was just really preparing our witnesses, keeping their damage expert out, and the way their people came across was their undoing. And then at the end, in the closing argument, to ask for all of that money for what we had said was just, careless playground taunting seemed very much undeserved. And so the jury deliberated for 40 minutes, including their lunch, and came back very quickly.
Vernon Unsworth emerged from the court dismayed at the verdict. His lawyers had asked for $190 million in damages, but the jury concluded he had not been defamed at all.
Unfortunately, it's not gone the way we wished. I respect the jury's decision.
You described yourself as dirtied and humiliated. Do you think you can now rebuild your life?
I just got to go back and get on with life as best I can.
And what does that mean, sir? What does that mean for you?
Well, I've taken it on the chin. I just have to get on with life.